Yo guys, welcome back to my YouTube channel, or welcome if you've never been here before. So I've just jumped on today to do my weekly forecast, and this will be the weekly forecast for the week commencing the 8th of August and ending the 12th of August. So guys, before I do get started with the forecast, I'll just draw your guys' attention to the written version of this forecast, and the written version of this forecast is available linked in the description of this video. Alright, so let's jump into it. Alright, so to start with, I'm going to do Nzdusd. So Nzdusd, overall, we're looking at a bearish situation. So we broke the structure there, and we've now broke the structure there as well. So because we have the last two consecutive breaks, we're bearish. For me, we're in an overall bearish trend. So based on that, until we actually see this high broken here, which for me, as I've marked, is a sell thesis invalidation point, I am anticipating that at some point we are going to break below this low and then create new lows on Nzdusd. Now, with that said, however, what we've had recently is a bullish break of structure, and that bullish break of structure has left behind this bullish order block here, which is where I'd expect institutional demand to lie. So what I'm essentially expecting on Nzdusd is one of two things really. So either we're gonna just now continue higher and then eventually end up at this bearish order block, and then we can sell off from there to then break the low, or what we're gonna see is now a retracement into this bullish order block, and then we can see when we get into this bullish order block, I will expect some type of reaction just because there's likely a decent amount of institutional orders in this area. But once we've reacted off it, we can see if we're then going to get that bullish follow through, and then that'll take us up here, or if we are then just going to be reacting off it and then maybe following through with the 4 hour to then break the low and take us into those new daily lows. So on Nzdusd, on the daily perspective, it's essentially a case of waiting to see if we can get down here, and then when we get down here, I think it's going to make sense for us to look for buys following that reaction from this area. And then with those buys, we can look to target somewhere up here in this range towards this order block. And essentially what that allows is for, we've had the bullish intent, and then we're getting the mitigation of the bullish move, and then we'll get the continuation of the bullish intent up to this bearish order block before we then sell off from there. So in terms of what I'm seeing in the daily structure, I do think that that's quite likely. Now, with that said though, what we've essentially had above this high here is just a liquidity grab, and we are in an overall bearish situation. So it could be, like I say, that we just get down into this bullish order block here, we have a small reaction, but then we do just continue through with the overall trend, and we do just continue that sell-off. So what I'd essentially forecast is if we can get back down here, I think it's fine to look for buys out of here following the bullish thesis, but I wouldn't be surprised if we do fail to follow through and we do actually see that bearish thesis playing out. So I think this is a key area to be aware of in terms of looking for buys, and then we can also expect a reaction. Now, that said, so potentially we'll come down here before then coming up to this bearish order block. Or we may just respect what I'll speak about in a minute, 4 hour. But either way, if we do get up here, like I doubt it's going to be this week, but if we do get up here, then I think it's absolutely fine to look for sells out of there, respecting the sell thesis, and then we can anticipate that we are going to make new lows on NZD. So looking at the 4 hour now, what I can see is currently where we've had this break of structure here, which left behind this order block that I spoke about last week, and then we've now had another break. Now we've not actually broken back bearish on the 4 hour, so on the 4 hour we are pretty much still fully bullish. So for me, what I'll be looking at is initially going into this week, we'll see if price is going to respect this low here. So for me, that's pretty much the bullish 4 hour structure. And what may happen is we will just respect this bullish 4 hour structure and then continue higher to move up towards this bearish order block that I've got marked here. So that's the first thing to look out for on NZD, is following the 4 hour for buys. Now, alternatively, what we could see is the 4 hour will start the week by breaking the structure bearish. And essentially, if we did just break bearish, then we would have this 4 hour bearish order block up here. So with that, we could then look to follow sells on the 4 hour out of this area here. So we break structure, and then we retrace, and then we sell down into the daily. So I do think we could see that as well on the 4 hour. So if we do break this low essentially, then I think we can look for sells out of there, which we can then initially target the daily with. Now, the interesting thing as well about that, if we do see that happen on the 4 hour, we may then as well not end up following through back up from this area. So that could be a good entry for a trend continuation, which takes us into new daily lows on NU. So I think the first thing on the 4 hour next week is looking for buys out of here. If that structure doesn't hold, then whatever causes the break, I think we can look for sells following that. And then as an initial target, we've got our daily order block, which is basically the first point where I'm going to expect price to potentially reverse and go bullish. But obviously, if that doesn't hold, then we've got a good entry into the trend. Now, like I say, once we are into this bullish order block here, I will be looking for that lower time frame bullish reaction, because even if we don't get the full follow through, I would still expect a decent reaction off this area just based on how big it is and the fact that it's a daily order block. So essentially guys, NU this week, we've got buys out of this daily order block, we've got sells out of this daily order block, even more like I say, it's highly unlikely we will get up there. We've got buys following the 4H if it holds, if it gets respected. So, and then if this fails, which to be fair, there's a good chance this 4H isn't going to hold. So if that doesn't hold, then we can look for sells out of the new order block, which could well be this candle here, depending on how these next few candles unfold on the 4 hour. So guys, I hope that wasn't too complex, but that's my view on NU this week, and it essentially comes down to I'm looking at this daily order block here, this overall sell situation. So we're essentially going to either be continuing up towards that, and that's going to be happening away from there, or away from here, or we are just going to now continue to make lower lows on the daily. So that is NU this week. If anything's not clear, guys, do just check the written version or leave a comment and I'll try and explain it better. Alright, so AUD USD. So on AU, what we had, again, it's similar to NZD, that we've got an overall sell structure. Now the thing is with the AU, we actually had this breaker structure was actually caused by this order block here, which has also now been invalidated. So in terms of the daily now, we have pretty much flipped bullish. Now looking at the daily, what we've essentially had is this bullish move here. That's left behind this order block down here. So for me now, on AU, what I'm expecting is for price to just retrace down into this order block, and then we'll see that bullish price action coming out of there. Now, what I've also got marked on AU, because it's clear to me, is this weekly order block. So clearly on the weekly, we've had this big liquidity move before we've then broken structure to the low. That's left behind this order block of imbalance. So what I'm expecting on the weekly is that price is going to retrace back up here and then sell out of that area. So for me, pretty much the ideal situation on AU will be that we continue down now into this order block. Then we see that reaction out of that order block on the daily, and that'll essentially catalyze the move, which will take us up to mitigate this bearish OB on the weekly before we then see that next break on the weekly. So guys, in terms of the daily, all I'm waiting for this week on AU is for price to retrace into this area, and then we can look for our entries out of this area to take us up to that weekly OB, and that should pretty much be what I'd expect to happen this week if we are going to see that happen. So when we get down here, we can look for buys. If we did get up to this weekly OB, of course, we can look for sells, but I don't think we'll get there this week just based on how long it's been taking for price to move that amount of distance. Now, considering that, we've still got to look at the 4 hour as well. So on the 4 hour, for the way I look at it, we've had bearish break and then we've now had a bullish break. Now that bullish break is actually still holding, so we've got this low here, and the structure's not actually been broken yet because I wait for a body close below, and as we can see, there's not been a body close below, there's actually just been a wick rejection. So based on the 4 hour, if this low here does hold and we don't get a body close below, then we could look for buys out of there, and that could take us up to the weekly order block. So straight away on Monday, if this is still intact by London Open on Monday, then I would be happy to look for buys following some type of reaction out of here, something like that. So that's the first thing to look at on AU, is this 4-hour bullish move. However, just based on what I'm seeing, all this impulsive nature on the 4-hour, I am expecting realistically that this low isn't going to hold, so we're going to see a break of this low. So what that'll essentially leave behind, just like I'm saying on NU, is this 4-hour bearish order block, and then we can look for that counter trend move away from there. So if this area holds, we can look for buys straight out of there, but most likely it's not going to hold. So we'll see this here will be a new break of structure on the 4-hour, leaving behind this bearish order block. So what can happen is we can look for sells out of here. That'll take us down into the bullish order block on the daily, and then we can look for buys out of the bullish order block on the daily to take us up into this weekly bearish order block. So guys, that's essentially what I'm looking at. Most likely I'm anticipating this path here to happen, and yeah, that's what I think is going to happen on AU most likely. But of course we could just have this one which follows the bullish 4-hour. So guys, that is AU this week. Again, I hope that was clear. AU and NU, they aren't the cleanest structures at the minute, but that's what I think is going to happen on them. Alright, so pound dollar, much cleaner structure than those other ones. So on pound dollar, like I've been speaking about the last couple of weeks, we have these two bearish break structure on the daily. That gives us our overall sell bias situation. So within this sell bias situation, for me, we're still in an overall sell bias until we see the sell thesis invalidation broken above this point here. Now guys, like I predicted last week, well, like I mentioned last week, we've got this bearish order block here on the daily, and that is essentially the bearish order block which caused the first break of structure here. So now after last week, what we can see is we went into this bearish order block and then we started to move away from it. So for me, I'm just anticipating that this move that's already started now away from this order block is going to continue. So based on the continuation of this bearish move, for me personally, the next place to sell from is clearest on the 2-hour, and it's this 2-hour order block here. Now this also lines up with the 4-hour, but the 4-hour high is up here in this wick. So I mean, technically we could sell from anywhere within that wick, but if we're going to see what's clean, I do think the 2 hours clean, and I do think that that is the ideal place to be looking for sells from. So the first thing I'm looking at this week on GU is the bearish continuation away from this daily point of interest. And with that, I'll be looking to target the bullish daily point of interest. So what we can see, even though we're in overall bearish trend, the most recent break of structure on the daily chart is this bullish break of structure. That left behind this bullish order block here, which has clear imbalance there. So what I'm anticipating is that we're going to basically just see this bearish continuation now. That'll take us down into this bullish order block, and then at that point I'm expecting some type of bullish reaction. So potentially when we get into here, we could look for some type of buy move if we can get that lower time frame entry, and then we can see whether either GU is going to reverse and then follow through with this buy move to go into a bullish situation, or potentially we'll just see a reaction off here with no follow through, and then we'll continue into lower lows on GU. So that's pretty much what I'm looking at on GU. Initially looking to follow sells, and then when we get down here, that's when I'll expect potential buys to come into the market, so we'll have to see what happens with that. Alright, so euro dollar. So euro dollar is pretty much the same as the last few weeks on the daily. We've got this bearish break structure, so overall we're in a bearish nature range between this high here and this low here. So in terms of where to sell from following that, we've got our extreme order block up here. So if we do get up here, obviously we have to look for sells following away from this order block here. But what we've also got is this here, which is just your daily base, and what we've got is clear imbalance there, which actually caused the break of structure. So for me, I wouldn't be surprised if we do just come into this one and then we see that sell-off coming through. So on the daily, I'm essentially looking for this bullish retrace into one of these areas before we then sell off. Now, as always though, especially with being such a big range, we don't necessarily have to come up into these premium areas. So, you know, like we could just pretty much come from the equilibrium from a 50% retracement and then now continue down to break lows again. So what I'd say is that ideally we will come to one of these, but if we do see that 4-hour break of structure, so we do end up seeing that 4-hour bearish structural transition, then it absolutely makes sense in my mind for us just to follow the 4-hour structure and look for bearish plays following the 4-hour structure, if that is what happens. But right now, what we can see on the 4-hour is that the last break structure was bullish. Now that came from this low here, and this low has seen these wick rejections. It's not being closed below, so technically this low is still being respected. So for the time being, until this low is broken, I am anticipating that we're going to see now continued bullish price action away from this low, respecting this bullish order block, and that will catalyze a move which will take us up into these daily points of interest. So that's what I'm seeing on EU, and if this low is broken, then that will give us our bearish break structure on the 4-hour, and I will look to follow that bearish break to then take price further down, because like I said, I don't think it's necessarily has to come all the way back up here. So yeah, the first thing to look out for next week on EU is buys out of here, but then if this low is broken, at that point, that's when we can potentially look for sells following the retrace back into the order block, which causes this new break structure. And then, yeah, if we do see the continuation of the bullish price action, we can look for sells when we get firstly up into here, but more likely when we get up into here, as that is the cleanest order block out of the two. Alright, so finally guys, GJ. So GJ, I've been speaking about this overall daily structure for a long time now. So we've had this breaker structure here, which is bullish. So that is our current daily range, is between this low here and this high here. So essentially at this moment now, we're watching how price is going to unfold relative to this range here. Now what we can see within that though is that below this range down here, what we've got is a bullish order block, which currently is unmitigated, and we've got this imbalance here, which has not been filled yet. So for me, it still makes sense realistically for price to come all the way down here, another 1,000 pips down, to mitigate this order block down here. So we've got a reason for price to come lower, but we've also got this here, which is a bullish order block, and that is a reason for price to go higher. So at this point for me, it's really just a case of following the 4-hour to see what's going to actually happen. So looking at a 4-hour, we've essentially had the last two breaks. So we had this break here, and then we've actually broken structure again here. Now what we've seen is we've now had this bullish break of structure. We've actually, sorry, two bullish breaks of structure on GJ. So technically now we are in a bullish trend on GJ on the 4-hour. So what I'm looking at really this week is, it's pretty complex because we've got two breaks bearish, so we've got this break and then this break, and then two breaks bullish. So in terms of the structure on GJ, pretty much buys and sells are both valid. So we've got this area to sell from. So this is the only valid area to sell from, is this area here. So if that gets violated, then I'll be looking fully at a bullish situation on GJ. But we've essentially got this area to sell from, and then we've also got this area here to buy from, and this area here to buy from. So honestly guys, it's really up to you what you do with GJ this week. I'm not super sure what's going to happen with it, but what I would predict is that we're either going to respect this area and then go for sells, and then them sells can eventually target this area down here, or we are going to basically be transitioning into the overall bullish thesis now, following this 4-hour bullish trend transition. And in terms of that, I would either expect this low here to hold and this order block here to hold, or failing that, and to be fair, this one has imbalance, so it is a bit cleaner. What we'll see is a move down into this area, and then we'll move away from there. So in a situation where this whole daily order block is going to hold, I do think it makes sense, to be fair, that this is going to be the order block which holds a bullish situation up. So yeah, with GJ this week, what I'd probably recommend is at the start of the week, we can look for the lower time frame entries following sells away from this order block, but then we've got to be wary when we do get into this area that we could see price continue higher. But more likely, since we've already had this reaction and we've got this imbalance here, what's more likely for me is that we'll see the sell move play out of here, and that will take us down into this order block here, and then we'll see that bullish reaction coming out of there. So to be fair, I'd probably start the week looking for sells. We can target down here, and then when we do get down here, I'll expect some type of bullish reaction, and then we can see whether we're going to get the full bullish follow through to then take us into the new daily highs, or if we are just going to continue with what at that point will be a 4-hour bearish structure, and then with that 4-hour bearish structure we can look to follow to take us to the lows. So guys, I hope that was clear for you on GJ, basically just following the 4-hour structures as they unfold this week. So guys, thank you very much for watching. I hope you have a safe trading week. Stick to your trading plans, stick to your risk management, and if you guys got any questions, just leave a comment below. And as always guys, I'm super grateful for you watching, so if you enjoyed the content, please do subscribe to the channel. Cheers guys, have a good week.